Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the final round of this year's Senior House Debating Competition, and a special welcome to our judge, Tessa Munt. As a previously serving MP, Tessa knows a lot about the power of words, and we're delighted to have her expertise with us today. Our motion for debate is, this House believes words are the most dangerous weapon in today's society. In proposition is the Lakes, and opposing them is Sellfield. Each of the main speakers has up to 4 minutes. The first and last minutes are protected time during which no points of information can be offered. Debate is then open to the floor so the audience can put forward their questions and thoughts. Speeches will be taken in rotation for and against the motion. All floor speakers should introduce themselves by name, house and year group. The debate then returns to stage for summing up, first to the opposition and finally to the proposition. No points of information can be offered in the summing up of speeches. I will now call upon Emily Lloyd to then open the debate for the proposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, Honourable Chair, esteemed judges and fellow speakers, we are proposing that this House believes words are the most dangerous weapons in today's society. Firstly, just to clarify what we are meaning by words and danger. The Oxford English Dictionary definition of danger is the ability to cause harm or injury. Words can be verbally spoken or communicated through written means. So, to start, just some food for thought. The pen is mightier than the sword. Now, we've all heard this saying, but this dates back to 500 BC, showing how powerful words can be used. Firstly, the psychological impacts that words can take. There is depression, anxiety, suicide, and many other long-lasting effects that words can cause. To further my point, here is the evidence. 1/4 of people in the UK alone experience mental health problems each year. Bullying plays a massive role in causing these issues through verbal and social abuse, which is the most common form of bullying. 41% of bullied young people experience anxiety, and 44% experience depression. But this is not only in young people.
Information?
Accepted.
How is this linked to words?
Because bullying is through words. The most common form of bullying is social and verbal abuse. Thank you. 8 out of 10 workers have experienced bullying in the workplace. These are statistics from Unison, and the 8 out of 10 people that have experienced bullying in the last 6 months, this leads to suicidal thoughts or depression. 4,500 are committing suicide each year in the UK alone. And teen suicide rates have reached a new high because they've risen 67% in 14 years. Secondly, how words can incite violence. Words are the most dangerous weapons. They cause multiple wars, whether that's from the First World War, Second World War, the Cold War. Words are what cause the tension that leads to the action. They start the action too, if you think about it, because throughout the chain of command, words have to be spoken to give instruction to press the nuclear button, to pull the trigger. Whatever it is, words are the weapons that cause the action. And lastly, death by weapons versus the death by words. As I said before, 4,500 people last year committed suicide in the UK. In comparison to the number of people killed by homicide, which was 571 in England and Wales alone in 2016, this is huge. The opposition may say that we can't prove a causal link between suicide and words, but actually, as published in the Journal of Applied Psychology, who analysed over a 2-year period the suicide notes and family interviews over 1,000 people, 1,000 suicide victims, they found that over 50% cited that bullying was a reason for them taking their own lives. If words cause this much suffering and pain to people and families around them, how are we saying that words aren't the most dangerous weapon in today's society? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emily. I'd now like to welcome Sophie Turkman to the floor to open the debate for the opposition.
Good afternoon, fellow speakers, honourable judges, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sophie in the Upper Sixth and I'll be representing Southfield today. So we are opposing the motion that this House believes that words are the most dangerous weapons in today's society. This means that we will be disputing the perception that words, as a weapon, are the most danger to our humanity. I'll be addressing the insinuations of the motion's wording and its literary origins before introducing whether the words themselves are actually problematic. Jasmine will extend the aforesaid, then she will provide case studies of instances where traditional weaponry proved undeniably detrimental, while also noting the importance of positive word insinuation. This will leave Zoe to summarise. Firstly, in reply to the proposition's first speaker, the UN definition is more official, but I'll get onto that later. And also you have drawn abstract links between words and suicide rates. Other factors are more involved. This includes predetermined mental health conditions, which also applies to bullying. Now, I would like to draw your attention to the word dangerous. While the proposition have the right to apply the definition able or likely to cause harm or injury, there is within the adjective scope for a huge range of measures of this danger. Are we considering danger in terms of pure death counts, government-determined security risk levels, or even the mathematical unit of a micromort? The list could go on. In fact, should a specific measure even be defined, the proposition with this level of ambiguity will be cherry-picking examples which display danger in a manner convenient to their argument. This fails to look at matters comprehensively.
Point of information. The actual definition of danger, or dangerous, is the possibility of suffering harm or injury.
So, that also is the definition. Right, so now there is the weapon. Here I find, with our opposition supporting the notion that words are technically equivalent to a rifle or a radioactive agent. The United Nations, among others, define weapon to be a nuclear, radiological, chemical or biological device that can kill or bring harm to humans or cause great damage to human-made structures. Accepted?
The Oxford Dictionary definition of a weapon means a means of gaining an advantage or defending oneself in conflict or contest. It's not necessarily a physical weapon.
Accepted, but this was the United Nations definition, which I found to be more official in such debate. So, words aren't a weapon by definition, and before it is suggested that weapons are synonymous with any vehicle which harm is caused, I would like to remind you that a House motion is hardly the time to lack precision in your meaning. Besides this, I would like to ask the audience what a weapon is to you. A weapon. A weapon. It's a gun, right? Or a bomb. Hardly words. Calling words a weapon hardly resonates with those that the proposition are trying to appeal to, and it proves insensitive to those affected by the brutality of conflict. Now, as you mentioned earlier, the quote by Edward Bulwer Lytton. We should appreciate his idea expressed in this motion. The pen is mightier than the sword. Adages like these have the tendency to be repeated philosophically over time. However, the meaning does get lost, and in this instance, he meant that communication can be more effective than violence. But also, more significantly, the complexity of circumstances tends to be discredited when mumbling such a thought. Now, it is never as simple as words just acting as a so-called weapon. People do not just follow orders blindly. Simple psychology establishes that. There is always a wider context which requires consideration. Why are these words able to contribute to danger? Surely we should be accounting for the intricacies of language and communication and the environment whereby words of a propaganda nature are materialising. Now, I ask the proposition to examine whether they can truly imply that words in isolation as a non-weapon weapon are the biggest danger to our society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophie. I would now like to invite the second speaker for the proposition, Tash Nobbs, to the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, honourable chair and esteemed judges, thank you to the points raised by our first speaker. Now I'm going to elaborate on our arguments, proposing the motion that this House believes that words are the most dangerous weapon in today's society. Firstly, I'd like to take a few moments to argue against what the opposition has said. You have claimed there's a bigger link with mental health and suicide than that is through bullying. That statistically is incorrect. There's more suicide linked to verbal abuse and discrimination than through mental health issues. The power of words is indescribable. They are the single most dangerous weapon available in today's society. The right words spoken in the right context can alter the lens in which you view the world around you. Words can be used as a weapon to do good or bad. The misinterpretation of the words in the Quran has resulted in the proliferation of terrorist groups such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Misinterpreted words have the power to kill. False religious indoctrination can lead to prejudice, oppression, suicide bombing, and other forms of terrorist attacks. For example, last year, the Ariana Grande concert, which resulted in 22 dead and 60 injured due to Islamic extremism. Not to mention the 9/11 attacks, where 3,000 were killed due to terrorism. However,
Point of information.
accepted.
Could the speaker acknowledge whether the issues related to the Quran were to do with how the Quran was interpreted rather than written?
But it's still the interpretation of words, and this is the point. The point is that the words, in the wrong context, can have these catastrophic effects on the rest of society. The exchange of words in grooming online is another key example of how it can radicalise young people into brainwashing them into believing a false set of values which can be detrimental to themselves and others. On the other hand, words can be used to facilitate incredible political and social change. For example, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech led the foundations for civil rights in America and led directly to the passing of the infamous Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlawed discrimination. Another example, Nelson Mandela's speech, I'm Prepared to Die, was clearly considered so dangerous that it resulted in him spending 27 years in prison. And at the end of it, led to him winning a Nobel Peace Prize, which was due to his work at dismantling apartheid in South Africa, a huge achievement. His rhetoric ended generations of segregation. 75 journalists were killed worldwide last year. This shows how powerful words can be to certain regimes. Why did Hitler think to censor newspapers, the media, free speech? Because words are dangerous. Because words have the power to change opinion, to challenge corruption, or to enforce it. Pardon? Yeah. Recently, the Saudi Arabian journalist Jamal Khashoggi has confirmed to have been murdered due to brutal circumstances because he dared to speak out and use words against the corruption of the Saudi Arabian regime. To conclude, words in today's society are as dangerous as ever. Words have the power to manipulate, to oppress, and to kill. Actions represent the actual implementation of events, but actions aren't possible without words. Actions are the consequence of words. Thank you.
Thank you, Tosh. And finally, the second speaker for the opposition, Jazz Horsh.
Good afternoon, fellow speakers, honourable judges, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jasmine from Lower 6, representing Southfield. I'd like to begin with responding to some of the opposition's points. We never implied that mental illness is a bigger factor than words. We implied it was just another factor. You also acknowledged that words in context were a problem, so not the pure words. And you also brought up several old leaders, which are not relevant as the debate is defined in today's society. So, as our first speaker alluded to, we need to understand how complex language and communication is before thrusting the blame on diction itself. Firstly, words can drift from their true meaning due to frequent misuse. For example, awful and awesome used to be synonyms for awe referred to fear, terror, or dread, but later awesome took a solely positive connotation. This allows phrasing from the past to be interpreted differently now, through no fault of the original diction. Secondly, words can translate differently, further allowing ranging interpretations. Similarly, it should be appreciated that the chain of reaction that the proposition is endorsing does not occur, due to the theory of reverse psychology. People do not just follow instructions unless there are other factors encouraging them to follow a course of action. So, in an environment where people already... Accepted.
Actually, as you were just saying, people don't follow instructions unless there are other causes. There's been a whole new law introduced called the incitement to the incitement to violence, and the Racial Hatred Act of 1995 has now changed to include incitement to violence, so showing that words actually do cause violence and actions.
Okay, so you found one case where that applies. So in an environment where people already feel threatened, propaganda may prove influential. However, still words cannot be considered the most dangerous so-called weapon, since they don't assert enough authority to initiate such incidences. Perhaps a real issue is the lack of censorship. This is implemented more easily than measures to control conventional weapons, since there is a much higher level of automation in filtering texts and blocking pages. Contrastingly, the UN Security Council are inundated with cases whereby real weapon use is hard to control. Again, proving words are not comparable to, say, a chemical weapon. Naturally, censorship has to be balanced with freedom of speech, a right which allows your opinions to be expressed freely with restrictions that are prescribed by law and necessary in a democratic society, in the interests of national security, territorial integrity, or public safety. And ultimately, this can all be illustrated by one analogy. A bullet is only a piece of metal until placed in a gun where it has the potential to do harm if shot in a particular way. Likewise, a word is just a word. It only produces danger when communicated in a specific way under specific circumstances. Now I'll provide you with what you're expecting. Many devices statistically prove more dangerous in death count measure than words. The Geneva Declaration on Armed Violence and Development Secretariat noted that 740,000 people have died from armed violence every year in recent years. Conversely, it is virtually impossible to find any studies which attributes words themselves in their various formats to any death toll or other reasonable means by which danger could be calculated. So what the proposition is proposing is not widely verified within research literature either. Surely weapons cannot, by nature, have so many positive impacts. Surely weapons by nature cannot have so many positive impacts. Well, if a word's a weapon, the proposition have failed to see the positive utilisation of words in our society. Examples of this are often seen in advocacy and often seen in gay pride. Words are also central to law, literature, diplomacy, politics, features of our society that maintain our morale and safety.
Please summarise.
Therefore, we should all recognise the dimensions of this issue. We cannot just be drawing non-concrete links between words and danger. Thank you.
Thank you. The debate will now open to the floor. It is now the audience's turn. Please can we ask you to keep your points brief and remember to state your name, year and house clearly. Please can we have a point for proposition?
Bella Francis, Southwood House. How did the proposition suppose that they can actually quantify the danger of words with the obvious destruction of weapons like bombs or nuclear warfare?
Oh, point for it. Yeah.
Can the proposition only explain how words can be constituted as a weapon when not included in the UN definition?
Another point? Yeah.
Can the opposition just clarify? They said simple psychology establishes that people do not blindly follow orders, whereas most, yes, there are 6 psychology students who will tell you that's exactly what psychology tells you in all the major studies that have been published over the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Towards the end of Jasmine's speech, she claimed that because words can be used for good, they could not possibly be used as a weapon for bad. Yet is it not true that any single weapon that's been used for good can also be used for bad?
Yeah.
Isn't a hate crime mostly spoken in words?
That makes sense for me. Big words can start conflict via social media very so.
Hi, is our religious text not a very rocky foundation to base your point on, as religion is such a widely differently interpreted concept of belief.
What's your name and house, please?
Loveday, I'm not in the house.
Oh, okay. Do we have any more points? Right. We'll now follow on, given that the open debate is closed, and we'll return to the summary speaker for the opposition. I'd like to welcome Zoe Portman.
Good afternoon, fellow speakers, honourable judges, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Zoe, Upper Sixth, representing Southfield. Firstly, I will directly respond to the proposition and some of the audience members. A recurring issue seems to have been whether words prove a direct correlation with bullying or suicide. I think it's common sense to acknowledge that other factors are involved, although we didn't imply that any factor was more significant than another. You also referenced that terrorism is a modern problem, except the central weapon, actually killing people, was warfare, not words. Psychology, that was brought up, so that's relying on people. People are inconsistent. The theory probably won't always apply. Fundamentally, I think there are two issues. Firstly, there's a lack of clarity with respect to what the proposition are actually proposing, with their motion relying too heavily on interpretation rather than definition. What constitutes dangerous is a particular ambiguity. Is that measured in terms of death count, security risk, or micromorts, or just the unit which is most opportune to their argument? Likewise, the premise of their motion is fallacious, since it's highly disputable whether words can even be categorised as a weapon according to the UN. I mean, how would they classify them? Because they're not chemical, biological, nuclear devices, are they? And let's not forget that the proposition's belief is derived from a 200-year-old metonymic adage that belittles the complexity of today's society. Secondly, regardless of any of the aforementioned, it is apparent that words themselves are not responsible for the devastation the proposition are attempting to link them to. There is a multitude of evidence supporting this, including the concept that words exist in space and time, as the audience member acknowledged, and psychology dictates that people are not going to just simply act on instruction without other factors influencing their behaviour. Correspondingly, it is not unreasonable to suggest that any issues arising from the employment of words cannot be almost eradicated by modern programmed censorship, which, for comparison, is much simpler than any means by which genuine weapon use is controlled. Moreover, there are some elementary contradictions to this motion, namely the seeming negation of the statistics that cannot comprehensively, or really at all, prove that words, in isolation, as a so-called weapon, pose any danger. So your claim is not well ratified. Unlike research, like that conducted by the Geneva Convention, which asserts the death of 740,000 people due to armed violence every year. We seem to have also forgotten that words have an overridingly positive impact when utilised in law, diplomacy, literature, and surely, inherently, a weapon's primary purpose is to inflict harm, which words, if we incorrectly allow them to be considered a weapon, do not do. Thus, I want to appeal to all those present, the proposition, the judges, and you, the audience, to acknowledge that words, from a technical level to their outcomes, do not fulfill any criteria by which they can be deemed the most dangerous weapon in today's society.
Thank you. And finally, to sum up for the proposition, Katie Maddock.
Ladies and gentlemen, Honourable Chair and esteemed judges, thank you to the points raised by Emily and Tash. I'm Katie Maddock, the Lakes, Upper Sixth, and I'm now going to summarise our arguments proposing the motion that this House believes that words are the most dangerous weapons in today's society. The power of words are indescribable. They are the singular most dangerous tool available to humanity. The right words, spoken in the right context, can alter the lens through which you view the world around you. You claim that the UN definition was more efficient. However, as the proposition, we defined the motion, and we defined the definition of words by the Oxford English Dictionary definition, a means of gaining an advantage or defending oneself in conflict or contest. This is clearly applicable to words, and you accuse us of cherry-picking our examples. However, you cherry-picked that definition to undermine our motion, which is, you're undermining the motion, not the debate here. The opposition they're just slamming the motion. They're not actually giving us any new information. They are just saying it's not true. You said that we brought up old leaders. However, in order to not repeat history, we must learn from the past and learn how dangerous words have been in the past. Use an analogy about a bullet, but who orders that bullet to be made? Who orders it to be put in the gun? Who orders it to be fired? It's all words that cause this. It's words in context
causing this. You claim that the law of incitement to violence was just one case, which happened to back our argument, but it's a national law that's been in effect for 12 years now. Surely for the government to put something like that in effect, there must be innumerable examples of words causing violence. The effects of words last longer than the effects of actions. 75 journalists were killed worldwide last year. This highlights how much of a threat people believe that words are to regimes. Why do you think Hitler censored newspapers, the media, free speech? Because words are dangerous. Words have the power to change opinions, to challenge corruption, or to enforce it. Anyone can learn to shoot a gun. Anyone can pull the trigger. But an act of violence in itself doesn't have the lasting and profound effects that words do. They are more powerful because they can spawn acts of violence, even war, and wars do change the world. Recently, the Saudi Arabian journalist Jamal Khashoggi has been confirmed to have been murdered due to him speaking out about the Saudi Arabian regime. However, they have not found his body because they believe it has been dissolved in acid after being brutally murdered because of what he said. That is words causing that problem there. The point which Loveday brought up is exactly what we're saying. It's the misinterpretation of words, or sometimes the correct interpretation, causing this, such as the misinterpretation of the Quran has resulted in prolific of terrorist groups such as ISIS. Misinterpreted words have the power to kill. False religious indoctrination can lead to prejudice, oppression, suicide bombings, and other terrorist attacks. Tash mentioned the Ariana Grande concert with 22 dead, 9/11 with 3,000 dead, the 2008 Christmas massacre in the Congo with another 860 people dead. This misinterpretation of religious texts can result in extremism, and extremism can kill. Words are not just weaponized on a large scale. The most common form of bullying is social and verbal. A staggering 1.5 million young people in the UK have admitted to being bullying in the last year alone. It often leads to long-term issues such as depression and anxiety, and 40% of young people who have admitted to being bullied have also admitted to having suicidal thoughts. It's not just our age either. 8 out of 10 workers experience bullying, and 20% experience it on a weekly basis. On the other hand, words can be used to facilitate incredible political and social change. Take Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, or Nelson Mandela's I Am Prepared to Die speech. Nelson Mandela's speech led to 27 years in prison because of how dangerous the government believed that words could be, but it also led to a Nobel Peace Prize. Words are dangerous because not only can they kill, but they can cause incredible change. Then we have the age-old adage, the pen is mightier than the sword. This well-known phrase was first written by Edward Bulwer Lytton in 1839. However, similar phrases can be found throughout history, one copy even dating back to 500 BC. And you say that it's not relevant to today's motion because it's today's society. However, we need to learn from history.
Please summarize.
To conclude, in today's society, words are as dangerous as ever. They have the power to manipulate, to oppress, and to kill. Actions represent the actual implication of events, but actions aren't possible without words. Actions are the consequences of words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for attending this debate on the topic, This House believes words are the most dangerous weapon in today's society. While the judges retire, we will take a vote. We will now take a vote between the houses. Please, all those in favour of the proposition, raise your hand.
And we know with the opposition.
And please, those in favour of the opposition, raise your hand. Okay. Thank you very much.
Right, we've come to the conclusion. The other judge has bolted. I'm sorry about that. Leaving it all with me. But I'd like to thank both teams and the chair. Well done, both of you, for actually putting a really impressive display on. There are some points I'm going to make. I'd like to make observations that may feel a little critical, but it's in the interests of bringing your performances up. I have to say there's not a lot to complain about, but I'd just make some observations if I may. Emily, well done. I thought actually your arguments were structured well. You were a little quiet. I'm a loud person, so I think you probably need to practice projecting and find one of your mates up at the back there and to actually make sure that your voice can carry quite clearly. And I felt that, though, to a certain degree, the lectern was a bit of quite handy to hide behind. So I thought your structure of your arguments was really good. You brought in the whole subject of mental health, of course, and you gave evidence which was absolutely clear. Your point of information was really good, the way you dealt with that, and you were absolutely clear in your, how words incite violence, how words cause tension, and then that leads on to action. And I thought the suicide statistics, the use of that was really rather good. And comparing that with the number of people who have been the victims of a murder makes it very clear the difference in scale. The other thing I thought that Emily did really well was actually to highlight what she anticipated what it was that the opposing side might say and tried to get shot at that argument already. So well done. Sophie, you stood out front, which was good. You had your cards, which is cool. You had a very well set out introduction of who was going to do what. It was absolutely clear what was going to happen there, and your definition of danger was good. You challenged on the points of information and challenged again on the second one. So I thought that was really rather good, and I think you tried to engage the audience with what's a weapon. I don't think it worked because you lot didn't engage particularly, but it was a really good device. It was a good try, and that's exactly the sort of device that you might use if you had a bigger number of people in the auditorium. That would have worked probably because you would have had more reaction, whereas I suspect we've got two sides here. So I thought that was good, and it was just the whole idea of introducing a wider context was good, really good. Well done. Right, Tash, really clear. Really clear. I thought you did a good link between the use of suicide and words and the weapons of bullying. I thought introducing the idea of ISIS and Hitler, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, the 75 journalists, absolutely fantastic, really good evidence as to why it is that words are different from weapons. I thought it was really clear the way you structured your argument, and I would thank you for that. And I think you pushed back well with the point of information, and you reinforced your point. So well done. Jazz? Fantastically clear. Your speaking voice carried really well. You seemed relaxed. There was a point at which, pretty early on, you came on and you did that. And I thought, well, there's somebody who's very confident. You moved back and forth. If you're going to move back and forth, I think probably what you should do is give yourself a slightly wider arc, because otherwise it becomes distracting. If you're moving from here to here, and back again to here, and back again to here, I think, oh, is she going to go further? Is there a dot on the stage or not? So I think probably you can, it's effective, because it's a very good way of making sure that your whole audience is aware of what it is you're saying. You're addressing absolutely everybody by moving back and forth. But I think I would go further than that short arc that you were using. Your point of information, I've never seen a dismissal that's quite so effective. However, I might just point out that perhaps you might need to deal with the point. I think you dismissed it very effectively, but you didn't actually deal with it. You just got shot of it. The danger also is that you turn your back on the audience when you are talking at the other side. And that's unhelpful because people need to see your whole, it's everything that you present. So, great gestures, well done. And I loved the sort of the argument of the bullet only being a piece of metal until it becomes, it only becomes dangerous when it's placed in a gun. But I think you might have structured a little bit more into your argument, that was all. So, well done. Where am I now? Now I'm on Zoe. It was a very clear conclusion. and the positives, the fact that you introduced the idea of the law and the literature and the diplomacy. That's really very good. I think the whole business of common sense, introducing the notion of common sense, was pretty effective. You got a very matter-of-fact voice and delivery. So if you told me that black was white, I'd be quite inclined, judging by your performance here, I'd be inclined to believe that it was. Really good delivery. I mean, really good, because it was just, you stamped your authority on the arguments. I disagree entirely with your arguments, but I thought that was really good because you were very effective. Well done. Katie. Really good, very, very good delivery, very good gestures, and the use of the lectern. It feels as though that was quite relaxed. You slammed the motion, and I thought that was excellent. Your words were really good. You explained how words were more powerful. And your use of the word, at one point you said something, admitted, which I thought was a very effective way of drawing people up quite quickly to realise what it is that you're saying, make you focus on what comes next. And then you used admitted again later in the same sentence, or perhaps a little further on in the paragraph, which again made me tie that and thought, oh, I need to absolutely listen to what else is admitted. So that was really good. I thought it was a brilliant finish, really good. And you summarised very neatly all of the arguments. You dismissed all of the arguments that had been made against. So I thought, actually, yes, it was really an excellent contribution. I have to say both of you they were really good contributions. I've got a whole series of marking schemes here. And we were both of us agreed marginally, and not because of the arguments involved, but actually it's the Lakes who we would say were the winners on this occasion. For inviting me here. I hope I can come back and see you all slug it all out again on another occasion. Thank you.
Can we please have another big round of applause for Tess?
Always a pleasure.
I'd like to give you thank you so much for coming here and for giving such lovely feedback and giving up your time to be here. It's an absolute privilege.
It's a pleasure for me, really.
Thank you.